This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We turn now to the remarkable case of Stephen Odias, a wrongfully convicted man who was released Monday after a judge ruled he may not have received a fair trial because prosecutors withheld crucial evidence from his defense lawyer. The case has raised increased scrutiny of New York City's criminal justice system and concerns about prosecutorial misconduct. In 2013, Odias was convicted for the shooting death of 15-year-old Juan Perez in the Bronx. At the time, the only evidence against the 31-year-old man were the words of a lone eyewitness who admitted to being intoxicated at the time of the murder. Odias was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Then his younger sister, Kalima Truesdale, set out to prove her brother's innocence. She scoured the scene of the crime and eventually found a woman who said she saw the shooting. Most shockingly, the woman said she'd already spoken to a detective at the time of the murder and described the shooter as a man not matching Odias's description. However, there was no mention of the woman's testimony in the version of the police report that was presented to the defense attorney. The original police report contained the witness's description, but had been surreptitiously redacted in the doctored version. On Monday, Justice Stephen Barrett quickly vacated the verdict, ordering Odias released and called for a new trial. Shortly afterwards, one of his defense attorneys, Pierre Sussman, spoke to New York One.
We knew that there was a lot of reinvestigation to be done in this case. We had done most of it. The district attorney's office joined us in doing that and came to the right conclusion in releasing him. He is still charged with the underlying murder. We are hopeful that the district attorney will see fit to dismiss his indictment for the grounds that they vacated the conviction today.
Judge Barrett did not reverse Odias's murder conviction, and the district attorney's office says that its investigation is ongoing. However, it is unlikely prosecutors will decide to retry Odias in light of the previously withheld witness statement. Kalima Truesdale welcomed her brother's release and briefly spoke to reporters.
I'm very happy.
This is something that you felt needed to be done to help this
Yeah, definitely.
Kalima Truesdale told The New Yorker magazine she wants to keep investigating the mystery of the altered police report and find out why crucial information was redacted from her brother's case, landing him in jail more than 3 years ago for over 6 years. Prosecutors are required by law to share with defense attorneys any evidence pertaining to a defendant's innocence claim before the trial. For more, we're joined by two guests. Jonathan Adelstein is an attorney focusing on criminal appeals and post-conviction remedies. He's one of the lawyers who represented Stephen Odias. And we're joined by Jennifer Gunnerman, the staff writer for The New Yorker magazine. Her most recent piece headlined "A Woman's Quest to Prove Her Brother's Innocence Leads to a Discovery." We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Jen, let's begin with you. Talk about this piece that you wrote so eloquently about in The New Yorker.
Well, you covered it very well up top. I mean, this is a story of what appears to be a police report that was whited out, as you saw on the screen. The yellow part that was shown up on the screen was the part that was whited out that was not shown to the trial attorney before trial. So essentially that part pertains to a witness that essentially vanished. So the trial attorney did know about that witness, and because of that redaction, it appears that this young man spent 6 years in prison and would have spent many more years in prison if not for the intervention of his family, his sister, his attorneys. He would have done, at least 25 years. He had a 25 to life sentence.
So, I mean, this is amazing. And with our radio audience as well, you can actually describe what happens. There's just a few lines that are completely whited out, so it just looks like it's another paragraph. But what was said in those 3 lines?
Was that the police had done a canvass of an apartment building in the Bronx near the crime scene, going apartment by apartment. And so each person's door that they knocked on, they recorded what they said. People said, I heard gunshots, or I just got home, I heard nothing, or I heard 5 shots, 6 shots, it sounded like firecrackers. And there was one woman who told them that she had seen the crime, she had seen the shooter, and she gave a description. It was 3 lines in the middle of the police report. Yet when that police report was handed over to the trial attorney, those 3 lines were missing. They were erased. And so consequently, they didn't know about this witness before they went to trial. And now, this week, the district attorney's office, 6 years later, admitted that this young man did not get a fair trial, and they set him free this past Monday.
How long was he in jail for?
He was in for nearly 6 years, but he could have done at least 25 if this mistake had not been caught.
I mean, this is an astounding story, Jonathan Adelstein. Talk about, from a lawyer's perspective, what this means. I mean, is now someone going to be, the prosecutor going to be tried? I mean, this is whited out information that led to a man's jailing for years.
Well, whether the prosecutor or anyone else responsible for this is indicted or tried would be up to the Bronx District Attorney's Office. There would certainly be difficulties bringing criminal charges after this long a time. Depending on when the redactions were made, they might even be barred by the statute of limitations. And historically, it's very rare for prosecutors to face criminal charges as a result of withholding evidence or mishandling evidence. The cases where charges have been brought and where convictions have been obtained against prosecutors are very much the exception. I mean, obviously, we don't know what the Bronx DA's investigation is going to reveal. It's ongoing at this time. We don't know, in fact, whether the redaction was made by a district attorney or by a police officer, or where along the process this might have occurred. So I would expect that, you know, as their investigation unfolds, we may find out more about what's going to happen to the people responsible for this.
Jennifer Gunnerman, you write about the prosecutor in the case and how he has explained the whiting out of the statement that the eyewitness identified someone else.
Right. I spoke to him. I called him up, right after the release of this.
His name?
The name of the prosecutor, Adam Austacher, and he's now in private practice. He left the office last year after many years. He had tried many felony cases, many high-profile felony cases for the Bronx District Attorney's Office. The way he explained it to me was that the whiting out was something that, as he referred to it, was sort of a normal practice in the office. Whiting out of witnesses that they had concerns might have their safety might be in jeopardy. But when I called the Bronx District Attorney's Office to ask if that was true, is that really kind of a normal practice in the office, they said sometimes they do white out the names, like a single name of an individual to protect their identity, but certainly not the fact that the witness existed, certainly not the whole 3 lines of information in the police report. So that's, one point of contention between the office and the former employee. And as Mr. Edelstein said, the investigation is ongoing, and we don't know exactly sort of what went on or who did the whiting out or what they were thinking at the time.
I mean, how could there possibly be an explanation that they're protecting the eyewitness? Obviously, as you said, they can take out the eyewitness's name. That's 2 words or 3 words.
Right.
But the sentence that says she explicitly identified someone else. Now, you go on to write in your piece that the former prosecutor said he eventually did tell the defense attorney.
Right, that's what he says, that's what he told me, and he subsequently told that to the New York Times. But the Bronx DA's office, which interviewed the trial attorney, found that he had no idea about this witness before trial, and so that's the dispute between the 2 of them.
Can you talk about the larger context here, the issue of a prosecutor torn between 2 missions?
Well, I feel like there's a sort of a tension baked into the job of prosecutors. Are they there to do justice, or are they there to win convictions at all costs at trial? And I think each person interprets their job a little bit differently. But, oftentimes we've seen prosecutors in the past in other cases who are so determined to win a conviction at trial that they've overlooked evidence or overlooked witnesses, or have just been so sort of zealous in their pursuit of that mission that they've sort of overlooked justice in the process. And I think, we've spent a lot of time focusing on police brutality, on terrible conditions in jails like Rikers Island, but I think, prosecutors are in some ways the most powerful players in this whole system, and yet prosecutors' offices have long been a sort of black box with no transparency or accountability, and I think that's slowly starting to change.
Talk about the heroine of this story, Mr. Odiase's younger sister, Kalima Truesdale. The day she's in court and she hears the conviction, the verdict for her brother, she crumbles to the floor.
Right. Well, the whole family, as was described to me, was in such a state of shock, expecting that their loved one was going to be acquitted, that when he was actually convicted, just started, is this correct? He was just started screaming and getting very emotional in the courtroom. And I was fortunate enough to meet the sister before her brother was released, and she was describing to me the extraordinary efforts that she went through to try to investigate his case. So after the trial, after the conviction, after they realized he's going to have to go to prison, she did her own street work around the crime scene, talking to folks, and ultimately uncovering this witness who had been redacted from the police reports.
And she went through the streets? She did her own police investigation?
Right. She did her own detective work and repeatedly went to this neighborhood where they had lived many years earlier, but is fairly dangerous. And with her cell phone and without any sort of training or experience, tried to conduct her own interviews and record interviews with witnesses or people who knew of witnesses to try to prove her brother's innocence.
Jonathan Adelstein, what happens now? Does Mr. Odiase, does he sue to get the how many years of his, to somehow compensate him?
Well, right now, Mr. Odiase is still under indictment. His conviction has been vacated and he's been released, but the charges are still pending. And the next step is to work with the district attorney's office to help complete their investigation, and we're hoping for a quick resolution of the charges. After that, there are a number of options open, which we're discussing with the Odiase family, and it's not something that we really are going to start on or are able to start on until a final resolution of the charges.
How unusual is this, and what do you mean by resolution of the charges? Because they have not vacated the conviction.
Yes, well, there are several ways the charges could be resolved. The district attorney could agree to dismiss them, in which case it's done, or the district attorney could seek to retry Mr. Odiase, in which case we would fight in the courtroom to defend his innocence. We are certainly hoping that the district attorney's office, after completing its investigation, will see their way clear to dismiss the charges, and we are working with them on that.
Mr. Odiase's response. Have you spoken to him?
Yes, of course. I was there in the courtroom with him when he was released, and I walked down to the street with him.
Was he shocked?
He didn't know until that day that his conviction was going to be vacated. He did learn before, shortly before we appeared in court. So he wasn't shocked. There was no scene of shock in the courtroom. But he was pretty happy, as you might guess.
So what's he doing now? He's living with his sister?
He's living with his family, with his sister and his mother, and trying to, starting to put his life back together.
Final comments, Jennifer Gonnerman, as you have investigated so many different cases. I mean, how many times have we spoken to you about Khalif Browder, who is a young man wrongfully accused, goes to jail, the teenager for 3 years, Rikers, is horribly abused in prison, comes out, ultimately commits suicide. Now there's even discussion of, even by the mayor, Bill de Blasio, of closing Rikers Island altogether. How this fits into the picture of criminal justice.
Well, this is the same district attorney's office. This is the Bronx district attorney's office that allowed Khalif to spend 3 years in jail without a conviction. The same office that allowed a defense attorney to receive a redacted document without a witness being known. They've got a new district attorney in the Bronx now named Darcel Clark. One of the first things she did was start to set up a conviction integrity unit, and I think they're going to really have their hands full with tremendous amount of work. I mean, we don't know if this is a one-off situation or if this is a pattern, part of a pattern of behavior in terms of redacting documents in the Bronx, but I think we're going to find out in the months and years to come.
And if I may, Ms. Gonnerman said earlier that a prosecutor can be torn between two missions. Under the rules of ethics, prosecutors only have one mission, which is to do justice. They represent the people of the state of New York. The people of the state of New York win when the right man is convicted, and they win when the wrong man is released or acquitted. And the defense bar for many years, has sought to encourage prosecutors' offices to open conviction integrity units like the ones in Brooklyn and the Bronx. And I'm very thankful to Darcel Clark, the Bronx District Attorney, for opening this unit and for taking the reinvestigation of this case so seriously once we brought our evidence to her. And this is about, there's more than just a redacted police report here. There was actually quite a bit more. But they took this reinvestigation very seriously, and they were not afraid at all to come to the right result. And I hope that in the future, more prosecutors' offices across the country can approach wrongful convictions with the same seriousness.
Is she the first female Bronx DA?
I believe so. I don't know that for a fact.
Well, we will leave it there, and I thank you so much for being with us. We will continue to follow the case. Jonathan Edelstein, attorney focusing on criminal appeals and post-conviction remedies, one of the lawyers who represented Stephen Odiase, who is now free after almost 6 years in jail. And Jennifer Gonerman, staff writer for the New Yorker magazine, will link to her piece on the Odiase case. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we're going to be talking about an astounding reversal of 21,000 convictions in Boston, Massachusetts. But first, we're going to talk about what happened on the streets of Berkeley, California. Stay with us.